guys? Justin 1 and Justin 2, or how do I?
Good question. Let me try and see if I can get.
I think I got it figured out now.
You good?
Yes. Eric, how are you?
Very good. I don't know if I congratulated you on your nuptials.
Oh yeah. No, thank you, thank you.
I know
It's been
you
a fun
probably a bit
15
busy.
days.
You're still on your honeymoon.
Uh, back from the honeymoon, so but
You're
that
still on.
allows me to talk about Bitcoin, so it's fun.
What's your last name, Eric?
Torre, Torre.
Torre. All right, cool. Good stuff. So I figured we're just going to kind of shoot the breeze and talk about Bitcoin. And Justin and I will kind of pepper you with questions and find out all about your perspective and maybe touch on a little bit about, your generation's perspective if you are so inclined to share, you know, from your generation. Does that sound good?
That sounds nice and easy. I'll share what I can. But I'm also
Okay.
going to ask you guys some questions because I met Justin. We spoke for a while. I think we spoke for a good part of the early morning.
Yeah.
And he really made an impact on me because he talked about how you Justin, you spoke about, was it your grandfather who worked for the Federal Reserve,
My
or
my great grandfather. Yep.
great grandfather? Yeah. So that's interesting, especially
Yeah.
the way things are, the system that we're living under, and what Bitcoin has come to do to this system. Let's see.
Yeah. And I was taken back just in talking, and you said that you had were I don't know if it had been your entire career or what that ultimately turned out to be, but you said that you at least were working in banking. I don't know if you still are, but that was also very intriguing as well. So
So what are you doing right now, Eric? What's your keeping
So
you?
let me give you a little bit of my background. I did work for a bank for a while, but my background after I left high school, I grew up in Queens, New York. Um, when I left high school, I went to a technical school. So I tried college, took a couple of history courses. They were pretty good, but I think I should have paid a little bit more attention. But what intrigued me early on in life was pretty much electronics, technology. And in those days, back in the 80s, they were dealing with computers. Computers back then were, pretty expensive. You can get a computer now for $600. I think they were around 6 grand. And they used the processor called 8088, an 8088 processor that had basically 16 pins, and you can troubleshoot it down to component level. So that's what I went to school for, and I worked for a couple of companies, sound level meter companies. They all went out of business. I actually traveled a lot from Long Island, New York to Boston. Uh, and and in those days, the economy was inflation was very high, and a lot of the companies, the smaller companies, were struggling with loans that they had taken out. So I was laid off. I went to work for another electronics company that was a lot smaller, but it was family owned. I was there for about 4 or 5 years. I actually got married while I was working there, and I went to ask for the boss for a raise towards the end, and he says he couldn't give me a raise. So I ended up leaving there and just started selling. Totally left what I was doing and I loved. I started selling beer in Brooklyn.
There you
You
go.
know, I became a salesman up and down the street selling beer, Coors Light at that. Um, and at that point, my wife basically said, "Let's go to Florida." Her parents lived down here in Delray, and I remember that I said I would never leave New York. And that was how old is my son? He's gonna be 30. Almost 30 years ago. So when I came to Florida, her brother worked for a bank. I got a job there with a savings and loan. And then I worked for a commercial bank. In those days, Bill Clinton had gotten rid of Glass-Steagall, which was an act that separated the investment banks from regular banking. So I was all over the place. They actually paid for my Series 6 and 63 so I could sell securities inside of the bank. All that was an experiment that most banks were dealing with. And then you had all these mergers. I worked for First Union, Wachovia, then became Wells Fargo. And, it just showed the instability in the financial system that all these mergers were allowed to happen. And, basically you were selling checking and savings account one moment, then you were selling mutual funds the next. So
Unreal.
it was very hectic and stressful. I'll leave it at that. I don't know if you guys want to interrupt me with any questions in the meantime. Nothing exciting, of course.
You want to go ahead, Justin?
No, I was just gonna ask the question of again, you had this understanding of obviously how banking worked in practice and how the financialization of banking kind of played out over this time period that you were in it, most definitely. But when it came to finally getting around to Bitcoin, which I'm sure we'll get to as well, do you think that your time in banking more or less drew you to it, or do you think that because you were again speaking to the technical aspects of computers and everything that you were working on earlier, do you think that that might have played a bigger role there?
Tell you the truth, by the time I left banking in 2005, 2006, around there, I went to work for an insurance company because of all these mergers. I went to work for an insurance company. And so I saw a different aspect of how you prepare a human being for his life. I look now and say that the banking portion is the offense. People want to accumulate some sort of wealth. Either they want to buy a home or they want to buy a car or something. So the bank helped in that aspect. They basically help in putting you in debt, of course. And the insurance part, which I sold a lot of life insurance, was the defensive part. So I, s- I now believe more in the insurance part because most people want to invest and accumulate assets at an early age without understanding or having any real understanding, any financial background that you're not taught in schools. And, there's so much more that you could do with insurance, for example. You're a young couple that just got married, you're buying a house, you know, you can, for a couple of dollars a month, you can actually leverage those couple of, maybe $100 a month or even less to protect your family, right? Where if you start to invest early on, you're basically taking a whole lot more risk with investments and stocks and bonds without having a full understanding. You may get burnt, right? And we've seen that it's not an easy thing to do. Going a little bit forward, I did work with Northwestern Mutual, for example, sold life insurance with them. I got really good at learning what, the specialties of life insurance. For example, how to use it to protect, you know, uh, a whole household or how to protect an estate. And later on, when Obamacare was coming up, I said, you know what? The bank actually paid for my life and health license. Let me learn a little bit about that because many of the people that I started to hang around with were selling Obamacare. And in the first year, people were walking away with $30,000, $40,000 a month in paychecks. By the time I got into Obamacare, sometime around 2013 or 2014, I think it was, the party had ended. And this is something that I always say that I feel like I always get to the party late. Okay. And this is where we'll start with Bitcoin. I met somebody working at an Obamacare office, an older gentleman who at that time was probably in his 60s. I was in my 40s. And he started telling me about cryptocurrency. Started sending me a lot of information. And of course, the first time I heard of Bitcoin, for example, my wife worked close by, and she said that one of the people that she worked with had gotten arrested for using Bitcoin, right? And of course, I had not done any research. And so I, like a banker and like somebody who thinks they know everything, you know, in my ignorance, I was like, that's paper money. It's not real. It's scam. And so the second time I heard about it was actually with that gentleman. His name was Tom. And I still keep in touch with Tom, have a couple of lunches during the month with him. We talk about business and Bitcoin, of course. And by the time that Tom talked to me about it, he didn't know much about it either. What we started doing or investing in was in a currency called OneCoin, which at the end was a pyramid scheme. I actually ended up losing, I think it was something like $1,500 on this pyramid scheme. And after losing it, I tell most people that it was the best thing that could have happened to me, because at that point, I don't like to lose a dollar. If a dollar falls out of my pocket, I'm going to pick it up. I don't want to lose any. I'm that cheap. But it it caused me to speak to Tom and say, hey, you know what? We got burnt on this. I don't know if have you guys heard of OneCoin?
Never heard of it.
Okay, so OneCoin was being sold by this economist called Ruja Ignatova. She was from Bulgaria. And they had printed these magazines saying that she was Woman of the Year. They pretty much fooled everybody. They started saying that this was the cryptocurrency that could beat Bitcoin. And of course, I had just heard of Bitcoin very sparsely. At the end of the day, she has disappeared. They do not even know where she is. So, we can find Osama bin Laden, we can find Saddam Hussein hidden in a rabbit hole somewhere, but she has apparently disappeared from the face of the earth, scammed people out of lots of money. But again, it's probably the best lesson that I've had in the last 15 years, let's say. Going back to my research, and this is the number one lesson, I'll say that Bitcoin causes people to study and to learn and to get educated, okay, on what money is, what fiat is, how the economic cycles work. You know, Justin W., right? You are from the school of Austrian economics, right?
Yeah, one could say I got a half my econ department at the college that I went to taught Austrian economics, and the other half taught Keynesian economics. So
Right. So, you have people that vow for their Keynesians, and the others are, they followed, Mr. Who was the founder of Austrian economics? Hayek,
Menger was the
Manger.
original,
Yeah,
yeah, and then a bunch of others that have
Manger.
come.
Manger. I think he was the father of marginal analysis. Right? Is that what it was? Which I
I
think is
believe so.
great.
There's so many theories that run together in that school. I can't remember who token which, but
Well, I mean, that has caused me to say, what is really, you know, marginal analysis. For example, for me, marginal analysis is you come to a point and this is what I need to spend my money on. For example, today I need to write my bills out, or today I need to spend it on this. There's a point where you come and you have X amount of dollars, and that's what you want to use for X in the future or for now, right?
yep. And then you
So
play into the
that's my understanding of marginal analysis, the little I've learned. But again, it has forced me to learn, you know? So that's one of the great things that at this age, I can say that it forces you to go back to school. Maybe the things that you thought were correct are not. Maybe we were taught erroneously. Like I think I may have told you this in our first conversation when when I was going to school, we had 9 planets. We saw a lot of stars, and then this telescope called Hubble went up, and those were not really stars; those were now galaxies. And now we found that years later, those galaxies are surround, have millions of planets around them. So things change from one decade to the next, and I'm glad that we're living in this time because with the internet and everything going on, it has put me at a place where I can educate myself a little bit better.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And speaking, or one thing I wanted to chime in with the again, the School of Austrian Economics, kind of all decisions are made at the margin, and ultimately those decisions can easily change based off of external variables and different frameworks in which you view what the decision was today rather than what it could be tomorrow based off of what you're ultimately how you're seeing the world, as you were speaking to, which is it's very true in the Bitcoin space as well. I wouldn't have made the decisions that I've made thus far over the last year without changing my framework. So again, all decisions that marginal analysis are made there.
Eric, if you don't mind, I'd like to just kind of go back a little bit there to your banking days. You said you got out of banking kind of 2006 or 7, just before the GFC. Knowing what you know now, well, first of all, when you were selling the financial products during that time, was there ever a time where you thought something just isn't right here? This is just doesn't the math isn't mathing.
Well, yes, I mean, to me, it never made sense that in this country, for example, you want to buy a home and you have to take 30 years. They give you a 30-year mortgage. That's your first. I mean, you can choose a 15-year or another mortgage. 30 years of your life to lock it up. And, at the end of the day, I mean, the Florida markets have been good, but that's a big investment for a young family. You're putting a big strain. You're putting a big strain on a family. And, of course, nowadays it's even worse. For people that have to lock into a house, banks aren't lending. You might find a hard money lender. I mean, you guys tell me your experiences.
Yeah, I mean, so I come from a real estate background, but I immigrated to America about 9 years ago. So in 2008, I was just kind of getting into the workforce. My first career had failed. I used to play professional golf, and that wasn't going anywhere. And then I got into the workforce and joined a family business in real estate. And in South Africa, the longest mortgage is 20 years. They won't go any longer than that because they have too much currency risk. So I came from the kind of Robert Kiyosaki school of thought where, mortgages are actually assets, and particularly in America because they fixed rate mortgages. Anywhere else, almost anywhere else in the world, they're not fixed rate mortgages. They're adjustable. They're variable. So my first house, I I bought it with the intention to flip it to try and make money that way, and it turned out to be a good investment for me. But moving here to America, with that whole mindset of fixed rate mortgages, long term, you can amortize it over 30 years. It was great, and it's the poison that's killing people slowly. And that's the reason that the property prices have gone through the roof is because the interest rates. You can lock in a sub 2.5% interest rate, and when money is cheap like that, when fiat money is cheap like that, it just pumps the prices up, and asset prices start running away from generations. So that's on my Bitcoin journey, you don't know what you don't know until you do go back to school and start actually understanding the mechanics of how this all works and how it all fits together. And so yeah, it was interesting for me moving from South Africa here, seeing a 30-year mortgage, fixed rate mortgage. And I mean, it's great. I timed it perfectly by complete luck. We got into our house and we closed on our house in January 2020 at,
Mm.
great interest rates. And I hadn't even heard about Bitcoin then. But I couldn't believe that my house just appreciated by 100 grand in like 8 months. and then the next year another 100 grand. And I've told Justin this on the previous episode. People don't understand that the house isn't actually appreciating in value; it's the currency actually losing its value.
That's 100% the way you have to look at it. I was when you say that, one of the clients that I remember specifically that walked into my office in close by, because I work, about a mile and a half away from where I live. But I remember this couple walking in, and they were about a little bit older than me, and they had just sold their house in Levittown, New York. Came to the bank to open a checking account. They came with a nice crisp check, 300 grand. And of course, I was supposed to try to sell them on mutual funds and things. But besides the point, I started asking them, you know, if they had any other assets. And they said, no, we never got a chance to really save. We bought this house for about $30,000 almost 30 years before that, the 60s. And in Levittown, New York, you know, the homes in Levittown today are probably a little bit over $1 million, if not more. The taxes are probably 12 to 15% a year. Long Island is not cheap, but it just goes to show at that time, $300,000 maybe is a good chunk to retire on for two people. Maybe. But today, $300,000 gets you a condo,
If you're lucky.
maybe in a decent community. I can't even say, maybe a one bedroom.
Yeah.
And then then you're more than likely going back to
So
work as
so what
well
you say
at
is
some point.
100% true about the money being worth less. And this is where Bitcoin comes for the rent takers. It's Pandora's box for the rent takers, for the banks. And I don't think that they see that. I don't think that Jamie Dimon sees that. And he's been told over and over. But because you're on a perch somewhere, Jamie Dimon, and you're living the life of luxury, you don't know how the masses actually live. It's similar to what happened to the Austrian Empire, you know, where everybody was outside, knocking, trying to get through the gates, and
The
they didn't have
Trojan horse
anything
is
to eat.
coming.
Yeah, and the royalty doesn't see it. They're like, yeah, what are you guys, crying about? We gave you bread last week, you know. So it's coming for the rent takers. I've said it for years. uh, you know, I don't know. What do you
Yep.
guys think?
You go ahead, Justin.
No, well, first off, back to the previous starting point on mortgages, and that I walked into, that was what forced me to go back to school. Was I think I told you this in person, but just through an unfortunate circumstance, had a decent chunk of change. I was like, this is gonna be a great down payment on a really nice house, like a one that I can build through a family or through a company that I was planning on working for after school, which I ended up working for. And all of those dreams came crashing down quickly when the price of the house that I had picked out had shot up by 30% overnight. And I was like, wow, this money that I'd been sitting on unknowingly just burnt a hole in my pocket, and now I can't even purchase this house or build this house anymore. So that forced me to really look at, okay, why am I being forced to buy this house that ultimately was built almost 30 years ago, 40 years ago now, relative to the brand new house that I could have built if I was 3 or 4 years older. I was right in school starting my freshman year of college in 2019. So I saw pretty much all of this unfold right in front of me while taking these economics courses. Right when I got out, I realized, wow, I've shot myself in the foot here by really not understanding. Again, I did, as much as I say that it was a school of Austrian economics, I still spent my time doing the basic college stuff that I regret, but it is what it is. So, but after
See,
that, I
when
had
you
the framework to at least realize and quickly pick up on the mistakes or the stuff that I didn't see.
Justin, so then when you say that, for example, and I mean, you're in your 20s, does that make you angry that that the generation before you or the generations before you didn't protect the economy? Should
I
it be
mean,
this way?
I see that I do see why a lot of people get fired up over that topic. And again, at the end of the day, like, especially now that I've really gone down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, I'm not necessarily angry. Like, it's unfair to say the least, but if Bitcoin does what it's going to do, then it's the same thing. We're buying Bitcoin now while real estate investors or individuals or families or whatever were buying real estate in the late 60s, early 70s, 80s, 90s, all the way still through today. I think it's going to be a very similar transition as all things ebb and flow. There's just opportunity. So, I mean, yes, looking back on 2008, and I truthfully come from a family that hasn't really ever questioned any of these topics that I have. And so, like, I look back on my time, I mean, 2008, I was 7 years old. So, like, I look back now and I, like, see the struggles that they were going through, and I was like, wow, I really understand. But I still don't know if I know they haven't spent the time to look at this stuff, which is okay. And I put stuff in front of them, and that's fine. But again, back to your original point, I do see why a lot of people in my generation are frustrated, but I don't think that they have sourced the right issue. I think that they're looking at smoke and mirrors, for lack of better terms, and without realizing the root issue, it's going to just continuously get worse. You're going to continuously blame the wrong groups.
Yeah. If Bitcoin does what it's supposed to do, it's like buying real estate in Manhattan in the 1700s right now, not in 1970. That's
Well,
what Michael said.
I've heard Michael Saylor say that it's like buying a block on the island of Manhattan in the early 1900s.
Yeah.
And it's true. And it's true. I think that it is that. But going back to what you were saying, Justin, it doesn't piss me off or make me angry, but you know, it's almost like it was fixed for the people that aren't really, you know, capable of getting in on the game early. It can hamstring a society, you know?
Absolutely. It's completely fixed. You've got centrally planned money. The people
Right. And
closest.
you're talking about Austrian economics, you should be preaching the free markets, but in 2000, in 2007, 2008, you're talking about, they were bailing out, you know, the rich, the banks. If it's really free markets, those, Bear Stearns was sold out to was it Chase? And 6 months later, Lehman fell. So I mean, Bear Stearns was a sign of something to come. And then you have the savings and loans that I work a little bit differently, but they're constantly allowed to fail. Why not the big commercial banks?
Socialism for the rich and vicious capitalism for the poor and middle class.
Privatized profits and socialized
Socialized
risk.
losses. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and again, I don't believe in fair. I tell my kids that fair is where pigs go to get judged. But, there should be some level of fairness.
Yeah, there should be rules.
There should be some rules that everybody
that we
should
all
follow.
play by.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's what's beautiful about Bitcoin is it's money with rules and not money with rulers, which is fantastic.
And I think we get back here, and this, I don't know what time frame, say that Bitcoin stays decentralized and secure and continues to play out as it is. Obviously, there's going to be some people with massive amounts of wealth in this new turning. But over time, assuming that people will, at some point, hopefully, if you go to a full Bitcoin system, monetary system, you will begin to get paid and or receive Bitcoin for certain goods and services. And again, I look at the fairness aspect, or the same level playing field that we're talking about here. Imagine if people's dollars just weren't devalued today. It flashed that into the world of, okay, I'll be working for Bitcoin knowing that at least these dollars aren't going to buy me less in the future. So the fairness or level playing field that I am hopeful for is that, again, there will be a time and place where hopefully a lot of individuals are being paid in Bitcoin and ultimately will not have the issues of, okay, I am working for a currency that's devaluing. Even if they don't even understand how currencies are devalued, at least their purchasing power is at least staying at least the same or increasing over time rather than decreasing. So again, there's so many in my generation, especially, who don't even understand that what do you mean a dollar is different today than it is tomorrow, and that concept changes drastically. So I think that playing field is instituted over a certain period of time at some point.
Yeah, Bitcoin will, there's always going to be a spectrum of, ultra wealthy and poor, but with Bitcoin, you cannot steal by increasing the monetary units. So if you've earned a unit of that money legitimately and you hold on to it, you cannot be diluted and debased by a central bank who can rapidly increase the supply and just debase the purchasing power of that unit. And as Jeff Booth says, the natural state of the free market is deflationary. So even though you might be on the poor spectrum, if you can save money in Bitcoin or save Bitcoin and the Bitcoin thesis plays out, you are going to gain in purchasing power over time because things are going to get cheaper against your Bitcoin. Your Bitcoin is going to increase in purchasing power. It has to. If we move as a humanity to a fixed unit money, that's the way it's going to happen.
Agree with that, definitely.
I think that a lot of the, and again, I don't follow this nearly as much as as I probably should, considering that I'm 24 and could possibly take a good opportunity here as well. But the AI world and how that plays out over the next 20 to 30 years, I don't think any of us have an idea of what its potential could be. But if it does play out, that is extremely deflationary. And how does that look placed on top of a inflationary monetary system? Things only get worse faster. So again, if you have either large language models or physical robots that are programmed with AI, being far more productive for base layer jobs, that also is something that you need to look out for as well. Again, I use some of these large language models and I'm sitting here, I'm like, wow, these things are 1,000 times smarter than I am.
And it's a major
that's absurd.
force. It's a major force on a credit-based system when you introduce a technology like this that is going to push prices down because the marginal cost of what this AI can produce is just getting cheaper and cheaper. And when you force that and impose that onto an economy that's a credit-based that has to grow, it's like two big worlds are colliding. And I think we're in for some fireworks.
And I think that,
Oh, go ahead, Eric.
no, I was just going to say that, if the U.S. is at the forefront of this, you know, we can really be a powerful country again. I think that right now there's not much respect out there for America. Uh, you know, other countries are trying to get away from the dollar-based system, and I think you said 30 years down the line AI. I think that, the I think it's probably 5 years down the line we'll have a very clear idea of where this is going.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it'll come gradually and then suddenly, and I think it's
Mhm.
most people are. I don't think anyone is, geared up for what it could do if it plays out the way the models are projecting it to, because it's not a linear thing. It's like a hockey stick. It starts getting exponential quickly. Um, it's going to be
This is one
fascinating to
thing.
see.
This is one thing about Bitcoin that I think people don't see right now. These jagged movements from day to day. They're in the long term, they're just going to be a smooth,
Yeah,
exponential growth.
when you zoom out, one of the things I like to reflect on is in terms of network expansion, how networks grow, and the time it takes to get from 0 to 10% adoption is the same time it takes to get from 10% to 90% adoption. So it's flat, 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 and then whoop, goes crazy. And I think we're right at the beginning of that little ski slope there. where
You
the
know,
worlds
this
collide.
is what's great about Bitcoin. You have 8 billion people in the world, roughly, maybe a little bit more. You know, we're at around 20 million Bitcoin being mined, 3.25 every 10 minutes. They're, you know, just a year ago, it was 6.6 and a half, right? And I think that, you know, within the next 2 to 3 years, before the next halving, it's going to be a point where you're going to say, I tell people, look, it's 110, 115, 130, 140. It's still on sale. It's
We
on
we as
sale.
we as a species have never, ever had something that has a finite supply. The best we've ever come is gold, which is scarce. But when the price of gold goes up, you mine gold. You melt down your cutlery if you got gold cutlery, or you take your teeth out if you've got gold in your teeth, and you're going to
Will,
sell it.
if gold was ever to reach anywhere near what Bitcoin would be worth today,
Yeah,
I tell people, and I don't know who it was that said that we'd be shooting down asteroids.
exactly.
We'd be mining the oceans because there is gold,
Yeah. Well,
you
just
know?
even the fact now that gold just had a massive rally this year, the amount of gold mines that are now profitable, that are going to switch on again after being shut down because they're unprofitable, and they're just going to start shipping more supply into this equation, and it's going to have an equilibrium effect of the price. So you've always got the stunt on the gold price. I mean, look at it already. It's come down from 4,400. It's just over 4,000 now. People see the price of gold, and all of a sudden, grandma's jewelry's getting taken to the pawn shop.
100%. You know, have you guys heard of what happened in Paris where they robbed the Louvre Museum?
No,
Okay, so this weekend some guys apparently robbed the Louvre Museum and took some priceless crowns and tiaras and you know, they got away. I don't think they found them as of today. And you know, this jewelry is priceless. It's from some empress, I think Bonaparte the Third from 1870. You know, but the thing is the stupidest thing to do because you won't be able to ever use it, ever sell it. What you have to do is basically take the jewels out of it,
I
melt
melted.
down the gold or whatever surrounded it, and it, listen, it's easier if they try to hack somebody's Bitcoin wallet.
Good luck. Yeah, I mean, all of a sudden, cufflinks and earrings and all of that. People are like, "This is worth something now," and so then the supply you just get a massive increase in the supply. That's what's
So
so beautiful about Bitcoin to me is when you start really going down the rabbit hole and you start understanding the difficulty adjustment. That when the price of Bitcoin can go to a million, you can bring as many Bitcoin miners online as you want if you have the means. All that happens is the difficulty adjustment just gets ratcheted up. The more hash rate that comes online, the difficulty adjustment just outpaces it because you're only going to release a block on average every 10 minutes. And if we start pushing too much mining power in and we're getting blocks every 5 minutes, it just cranks up the difficulty ratio for the supply schedule. It's beautiful.
it is, and it's not, and it's not cheap for these miners to mine these coins. So, you know, I could see why, you know, sometimes the whales want to cash out a little bit, and you know, and that's a plus for us because it caused that price to come down a little, and we can buy a few more satoshis. I will speak to this going back to my friend, and when I actually took part of an IRA to roll into Bitcoin. It was around 2017. And when I first started really doing my research, it was a little bit under 1,000. And by the time I actually started doing my research and say, okay, I need to get a wallet and go to an exchange and do my KYC, it jumped to about 7,100. I was looking at a screenshot that I took from an old Galaxy phone that I had, and it was around $7,100. And at that time, I was like, shit, I missed the boat again. Excuse my French, you
It
know?
it's
So
beautiful. Everyone that buys Bitcoin thinks they bought it at the top. They think they're overpaying. And if you hold for long enough, you will wish you had bought more.
And that's why now it is imperative that while it's in its low 100s, you know, keep buying,
For
keep
Yeah,
sure.
buying.
Go for it, Jeff.
back to my generation for a quick moment. Like I've really been thinking about this a lot, and Justin and I were trying to figure out how we can do a pretty much a whole episode on this at some point in time. But like we are at the more than likely at the tail end of what is one monetary system, and for the people who are pretty much about probably really 15 to about 30 right now, like you're at the tail end and you're at the worst positioning in the late stages of this monetary system. Like if you don't get the next one right, you are going to be, there is minimal opportunity to really do much in terms of potential leapfrogging of just basic positioning in life. And again, I just see this thing as like if you are resentful against Bitcoin, potentially it could potentially hurt you while you are already at the bottom of the barrel in this other monetary system. That, and again, it all circles back to monetary literacy or economic literacy too. It's just it's sad what we've been taught, and then everybody just takes it as is, and it's just not what it is at all.
Yeah. But I
Well,
mean,
you know,
you
ignorance
go
is
ahead.
expensive. Ignorance is expensive, and so is procrastination. You know, uh, everyone gets to buy Bitcoin at their price that they're supposed to get it.
Everyone gets Bitcoin at the price they deserve. I must
Yeah,
tell you, I've got a buddy that I'm working on to, I mean, I've been speaking to him for over a year now, and he comes from a very wealthy family, but very traditional, very conservative, and he's starting to get it now. But they still, the fiat mindset of it's unit bias, first of all. He just wants Bitcoin under 100,000. I said, you might get it, but what you delaying is your education, because you need to get off zero straight away, and you don't have to allocate your entire portfolio to it. Just do enough that it's going to make you pay attention, and then you're going to start studying more. Because we've all had this. I don't know any Bitcoiner that as soon as they heard about Bitcoin put 100% of their money into it. I don't think anyone does that. You slowly drip in, and as your education, you start building up your education, your conviction comes up, then you can start allocating more and more. And then obviously, the further down the rabbit hole you go, I mean, you can see the books behind me. It just becomes all encompassing. And then you get to the point where you've looked at every single aspect that you can look at, and all roads lead to Bitcoin. And yes, everyone gets Bitcoin at the price they deserve, but the get is actually getting it mentally. Once you click Bitcoin, then you away, then you set, because then you can just keep allocating whatever you know, whatever you make in fiat that you can spend and save, that you can spend on Bitcoin, which is savings. That's you getting it.
I will say one other thing. A few months ago, I read an article that was on Zip Ranks. It might still be there. It was about how rare it is to find someone who owns one Bitcoin. Okay, it's a very rare thing. In other words, a regular layperson. And the reason being is if you bought a Bitcoin, and I can tell you from my personal experience, I bought it inside of an IRA, okay, a Bitcoin IRA in those days, and they were charging $250 a month to manage it. Okay. And as the price was dropping, okay, and you're getting charged 250 a month, you think a lot. But thank God it was in an IRA because I would have sold. I would
Because
have
you got
sold.
the IRA stopped you because you were going to get penalized with taxes.
Exactly.
Okay.
Anyone that says that I'm going to buy it at 110, hey, it might drop to 80. Will you even keep it at that point? You might sell it. You'll panic. You know, the thing is this: even if it's 130, buy it. It's still on sale, and don't ever look at it again. I tell my wife, I'll never sell. I'll never sell. You have to have that conviction. She goes, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to leave our kids? Well, I I can still borrow against it. You know, like you said, It's buying property on the island of Manhattan in the 1700s. Never sell.
See, the
I'll
thing is,
sell my house because every 20, 30 years I have to replace the roof, the air conditioner.
Mhm.
Right now I've got a bunch of things falling apart in the bathroom, but you know, Bitcoin, I don't think has that problem.
Yeah, once you get to a level of understanding in Bitcoin, it teaches you low time preference. When you're looking at price fluctuations in US dollars from 110 to 80 to 130, it's rounding errors when you start zooming out and looking at what is it going to look like in 5, 10, 15, 30, 50 years time. Like if this is generational wealth, which is, Bitcoin, everyone's going to descend on Bitcoin because humanity's always ever chosen one form of money until the fiat currencies, started doing that. But gold was always money, international money. We all chose gold as our form of money. And so Bitcoin's going to be that one in the digital era. So when you zoom out and you think, well, I have an opportunity to buy this stuff now, if anyone can get to one Bitcoin, you are 1/21 millionth of everything in the world for the future human productivity going forward. I don't think any of us can actually conceive and comprehend what that looks like from a purchasing power and wealth standpoint.
I mean, I just listened to what the experts say. I think Tyler Winklevoss said that at that time it was 40 million millionaires in the world. I think now it's about 60 million millionaires
Hmm.
in the world, and there's only 21 million Bitcoin. A lot of millionaires are no longer going to be millionaires in that under that
Yeah,
standard.
yeah.
Under the Bitcoin standard, a lot of people will no longer be millionaires.
Your fiat currency is going to zero.
And
I
the
mean,
key thing is,
I used to be a billionaire. I don't know if you know that. I was a billionaire in Zimbabwe dollars.
yeah,
And we laugh.
Zimbabwe
It's funny,
dollars.
but
I
that's the
think I
one.
bought some on eBay. They're
I was
selling it on eBay. It's still worth something. It's
yeah
not. It never
for
goes to zero.
for comical relief. Yeah, comical purposes. But I mean, I was playing golf with a guy that South Africa is the neighboring country of Zimbabwe, and he was from Zimbabwe. And I didn't even understand like but I just thought it was hilarious that he gave me $100 billion note. So I had 100 billion Zim dollars. It's crazy.
Well, that's what hyperinflation has done to many of these countries. You know, it's I think we're lucky that we do have a banking system here that you don't really see the problems abroad, but the smaller countries like in Africa and out towards the Philippines, and they're willing to take your dollars. When I've traveled to Turkey, for example, or my wife and I take a trip once in a while to Europe, and you know the tour guides are constantly thanking us. Oh, thank you for coming to our country to spend your dollars. you know they don't even want their Turkish money, they want
No,
dollars. you
because
know
dollars to them is what Bitcoin is to us. It's a harder currency.
You were speaking about the banking system, obviously, as we've alluded to many different times and many different aspects. One question that I had for you was like, again, there was a time not that long ago, a couple years ago, where I genuinely thought that banks, when you walked in, you were taking out a loan, and ultimately it was somebody else's money that was sitting in the vault back there, and that's how you ultimately acquired it. So I just wanted to get your understanding, and maybe I don't know if you work directly with fractional reserve banking, but how that process works, and if you had any fun stories from your time in banking where that might have played out.
so yeah, one of the things, as you start working at a bank, you start to see that, you know, I've seen a lot of bank robbery movies, right? For example, let's break into the vault. Uh, the banks don't actually keep any money in the vaults, or in other words, they have to have a certain cash requirement by law. It's I forgot which one it is, Reg double D, double C, which one it was. It was a regulation. But every so often, the head teller has to clean out and count everybody's draw. Oh, and the teller actually doesn't hold more than like maybe $3,000 in her drawer. and keeps it in different drawers. And so if somebody goes up to the window with a gun, they're going to give them, they're going to walk away with less than $3,000, right? And in the actual vaults, the only thing worth anything in the vaults is whatever anybody has in their safety deposit boxes. Because in the morning when the vaults actually open up, yeah, there's the guy from Wells Fargo, or what's the other armory,
Brinks truck.
the Brinks truck, comes and gets it. So,
Crazy.
so that was one of the things that made me laugh. I was like, oh, there's actually no money in here.
And
The
I'm guessing
tellers
the
used to
same
be
is,
like, yeah, we're not allowed to keep anything.
and it must be the same in terms of the actual digital money when when someone comes in and gets a loan, that money is just created out of thin air.
Right. So banks frown on money anyway. They don't want to carry and have any cash. So when someone came in and I wrote them a loan, for example, whether it was a home equity loan for 100 grand, I would be like, sign here, 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 and sign the bottom one, and I'll go get you your check. So I'd go to the back and get the teller to print the check, and I'd come back and give them a check. Nobody deals in cash, and it's even worse now that everything works on debit cards and credit cards. Venmo, nobody even walks around with cash. I think I'm the only person that walks around with like some cash. I tried to pay with cash at BTC for my lunch, and they laughed at me.
So Eric,
So
what I like to call the aha moment when you heard about Bitcoin, you maybe had someone say you need to look at this a little bit more seriously and kind of do some reading here or there. What was the moment, and tell me what you kind of processed where you're like, okay, this is real. Bitcoin it's it. What went through your mind?
well, it was a lot of actually going in on YouTube and listening to Max Kaiser, Andreas Antonopoulos. Andreas
Hmm.
Antonopoulos to me is the man. Without him, I wouldn't understand anything. There was a book that I was reading at that time called The Commanding Heights by Daniel Jurgen. Uh, Talked about Austrian economics versus the Keynesian economic system, and how both of these people, have made such a great impact on economics, and both were successful in their lifetime. The Keynesians had the middle part of the century where they were, they looked like the winners, and towards the end, it looked like it was Hayek. I think that now we have a blend. You have the president now wanting to take, private companies and take their money. So, it says a lot about, are we going back to taking the commanding heights, the technology part of it? That is something that to me makes me want to learn more, because what can happen? What, I think it's pretty predictable when he says that I'm going to raise tariffs on China 100%. I know what the market is going to do. So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to buy, you know? But what can happen really long term if you play around with the markets that way? They're manipulated in that aspect, you know?
Yeah, it's an interesting world when it comes to like all these. I had done some minor reading in college on like investing and how to manage your portfolios and everything. Looking back on that, I'm just like, all this is completely out of the window. Like all the major thought processes on PE ratio, and they still play in some cases, but like we are living in a macroeconomic landscape that is going to more than likely be very inflationary over the next decade. And that just, there's again, just so many people that are going to think that the 401ks and the S&P 500, which the S&P 500 might fare well in relative terms to other assets in that realm. But just, I just don't see, there's just going to be a lot of people that wake up to the inefficiencies of where they're storing their wealth over the coming decade or two.
Yeah, that's why we call this measured in watt, because your dollar makes you look like you're getting rich, but you're getting poorer because your purchasing power is going backward.
Yeah, and I was looking at I think it was Preston Pish podcast today, and one of the guys that he had on, they do like a quarterly update with him and some other guys. Um, but they pulled up a chart showing the S&P 500 priced in gold over the last like 60 years, and it shows like these patterns, and like you get to the late 60s, and it's again what was happening in the late 60s. You had a lot of countries that started to become very weary of the dollar. Ultimately, obviously, we go off the gold standard not too long after. We're in the middle of Vietnam. We're in this major war that nobody really wants to be a part of, but the government is funding hand over fist. And then you see it priced in gold, the S&P crater for a decade. Or not, I don't know if it was a decade. I actually think it was more. I think the bottom was 1980. So like you see these ebbs and flows of more or less getting into America economically and getting out of America economically. And I I just don't see how we don't see something similar to that over the coming decades.
That's going to be crazy. They're going to have to. I mean, this debt to GDP is we're at 120% now, and there's been plenty of studies that said once you get beyond that number, there's just no coming back. You get into a debt doom loop because inflation is going to run so hot, it's going to get
Well,
crazy.
have you guys listened to Jack Mahler's?
Yeah, a lot. I don't know which one you're referring to, but I listen to him a lot.
Well, the last 2 months, I think he's been blowing the whistle on what the Russians are saying, with treasuries and these stable coins. And it's just a question of which morning are we going to wake up and, you know, and we've we've handed over this hot potato over to the Europeans because that's basically what it is. And, at that point, the markets will react, and I think Bitcoin will separate itself from the markets.
Yeah, as Larry
And
says, there's going to be a massive print, and then you're just going to see that money has to go somewhere, and you're going
it's a vacuum.
to and it's going to be this incredible demand with an enormous amount of fiat into this finite asset that the user base have been beating the drums on this for the last whenever they got orange pilled, and as you said, we all just going to hold, and it's gonna be like rocket fuel. At least I
Yeah, I
hope.
I just feel sorry for the ones that are holding, Ripple
Bonds,
or bonds or or
treasuries.
or even Ethereum. I don't know. It's just not. It doesn't seem. Some people. Again, it's a hot potato. Uh, so Jack Mahler is somebody that you know he went to El Salvador and pretty much orange pilled the president of El Salvador, Nayib
Kelly.
Bukele, right? And so right now, at Bitcoin conference, they talked a lot about that. He was a little bit milder at the conference. Usually Max Kaiser is pretty loud, but I appreciated being there because he was pretty much him and Stacy are people that
Yeah, they cool.
orange filled me.
So did you go
Yeah.
to the Vegas conference, the Bitcoin conference
No,
event?
no, I didn't go to the Vegas conference. I actually was not even gonna go to any conference, but my wife was like, "Go ahead, you'll meet some people," and I was
That's
like,
cool.
"Okay." I said, "Okay." I didn't even want to spend the money on that. And I'm glad I did because I met quite a few people that have different ideas. They've given me some great ideas, and I think that now in South Florida, in Central Florida, if we can start, talking to people, it's still early. I used to say
Super.
it wasn't the first inning of a ball game. It was probably, the pitcher warming up in the bullpen.
Hmm.
But I think we are somewhere in the top of the first, top of the second inning, and things are starting to move. We just have to, stay positive, stay convicted to what we actually believe, and there are a lot of negative thoughts that come with the price volatility. But like Max Kaiser says, Bitcoin is love. It puts everybody at a consensus where we can trust each other, right? Let's say, for example, you two and I decide to go out to dinner. We would probably argue for 10 minutes of what we want to eat. You know, I might want sushi, you might want steak. Justin W looks like he's a vegetarian, no?
Shot across the bow.
It's okay. It's okay. Listen, I tried it. I couldn't stick. But the thing is that we would probably argue for 10 minutes where Bitcoin every 10 minutes takes millions and millions and millions of computers and comes to a consensus, you know, comes to an agreement. And that's what's so beautiful about it. It's it's a trust algorithm, a love algorithm.
Yeah. Trustless.
Bitcoin.
You can trust it because you don't have to have anyone centralized looking after it.
Yeah, the Bitcoin protocol ultimately can't break trust. So we'll see. We'll see. Any other questions you had, Justin?
I'm good. This was a fantastic hour. I appreciate your time, Eric. This was very cool. I didn't even do an intro. We just went straight
right
into it.
it.
We went straight into it. It was like a little fireside chat. I appreciate it. It was very
A
cool.
lot of fun. Looking forward to speaking to you guys in the future. I think I can still learn from you guys. You guys are pretty smart, and let's stay in touch. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Take care. Appreciate you, Eric. All the
Take care.
best. Cheers, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Eric, just keep your computer on. Wait for it to everything to render. Just hold on. I'm gonna